recording in the cloud. Go for it, Julia. The floor is yours. First of all, first, let me just say before we start, it's such a pleasure to have you here, Julia. And we've been big fans of you for for a very long time, and you've had such a tremendous, a very positive effect on so many people's lives. So first of all, thank you for all that you've given to the world.
Thank you. So I wanted to read a poem because I believe that a lot of times we think that creativity is born from pain. We have a mythology that says it's painful, and we can therefore create. And what I have found is that sometimes creativity is born from joy. So I wanted to read a poem that was born from joy, and I dedicate it to your magazine.
Thank you. Beautiful. Well, actually, we will make sure to have that poem have its own page in the magazine. We'll give it space to breathe. Beautiful. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. Come to me. There is no darkness in which I cannot see you. Come to me. Your green heart, my green heart holds your ancestors. They are waiting to hear your dreams. Speak to them. They know your name. Do not imagine you are alone. Do not imagine they have left you. They are listening, waiting for your voice. Come home. All of us are waiting. Every bird remembers you. The lion, in his pride, still knows your name. The gazelle, the snake, the silver heron lifting at the shore, all these and more, your family. Come back to me. You do not need to grind your bones to dust, rusting your heart. You are known to us. Only come home.
It's beautiful.
There
Thank
you have
you.
it.
Wow.
There you have
Very
it.
moving. Very moving. You know, well, it's alluding to many things there. I mean, the idea that you're not alone, very strong, that we all have the ability to reach out. This is something that we will talk about that is a big part of, the listening path as you teach, is that we really aren't alone, and that, uh, there are ways to access many different voices and have guidance. And I guess um, it's interesting you mentioned that it came from joy, this poem, because it has quite a mix, it seems, of joy, but also some slightly heavy things in there as well, right? It's a loneliness is not is by no means a light matter. Um, but I like that. I liked what you said about the fact that the artist doesn't have to create from pain. Trying to break that stigma. This is something that you also highlight, quite often in the artist's way, is that there's this cliche of an artist, this caricature is someone who's broke, promiscuous, always struggling. I don't know, addicted to drugs, whatnot. Uh, but you don't have to be. An artist doesn't have to be to suffer in that way, right?
And that's where the line goes. You do not need to grind your bones to dust, rusting your heart.
Wow. Did you do that at some point? Uh, did you suffer in that way?
Well, I think before I stopped drinking, I was driven by my ego,
Hmm.
and I wanted to be brilliant, and I wanted to be the very best. And so I would write and rewrite, uh, grinding my bones to dust, rusting my heart.
Ouch. I mean, you also highlight the the dangers of perfectionism as well, right? Which also has to do with that to some extent, right? Not being too harsh on ourselves and allowing things to create. Not does that make sense as well?
Yes, I think perfectionism is a demon that besets many people. and keeps us from moving ahead in our art. We want to do it perfectly, so we measure ourselves against the work of masters, and we come up short. And what we don't realize is that the attempt to be creative uh, is enough.
Yes. I mean it's a very profound thing. I mean, you talk about in the artist way, you even name your inner critic. I think you named him Nigel or something like that.
Yes, Nigel. Nigel's been with me since I was 18 years old.
How's Nigel doing these days?
Well, Nigel is perched on my shoulder right now saying, I hope you're articulate, Julia.
Well, I hope you don't pay much attention to Nigel because obviously you're fantastic uh, and and so full of wisdom. I mean, just already doing this dance right now. We've only started. I'm already feeling the rhythm and I'm loving it. So um, and it's interesting. In the book, you do mention in the artist way different guides, but I don't think I'm not sure if you actually give a name to your creative self because you've got there's this idea, I guess, of the intellect versus the heart, and Nigel, I guess, is the intellect or something, but you never really, I'm not, you don't in the same way because I guess you wanted to make Nigel into a caricature, perhaps not to take him too seriously, but you don't actually name the heart that I'm aware of, or maybe is that
No,
right?
I don't name it. I don't name it. It's something that I feel is broad reaching and free. And I, if I have a nickname at all for the heart, it's LJ for Little Julie. And I would encourage people to nickname LE, Little Eton.
Thank you. I like that. Well, that is your inner child, right? To some extent, not just, right? It's broader than that, but you do, to some extent, the LJ is seems like that because you often use that when you're asking for guidance, uh,
Yes.
and yeah, um, which is a very powerful tool. Um, so okay, well we're gonna go through some bits of both books, but just to be clear, the Artist's Way, I mean, it has had such a tremendous impact, and you know, could you ever have imagined that it would reach so many people? I mean, just I think I checked on Amazon. I think it had like what was it, Goodreads or something like almost 100,000 reviews, which is just insane. I mean, because uh, yeah, and that obviously that's just in the English language.
Well, when I wrote The Artist's Way, I thought I was writing it for myself and about 10 friends. And I didn't dream that it would reach to millions as it has. Uh, but what I found was that I was writing from a spirit of service, trying to help those friends of mine who were blocked. And I think the spirit of service is what makes the book continue to be popular.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a book that's so accessible and filled with so much wisdom. And I will say, in preparation for this interview, I wanted to do an accelerated course in both. So because I didn't have enough time, so I did that actually, and um, and I found, because for those who don't know, who are watching or listening, um, there are several things that are kind of the, I guess, the building blocks of the Artist Way. First of all, it's filled. The Artist Way itself has lots of exercises, tons of exercises, and they're amazing exercises. They're so profound. Sometimes I'm blown away by the wisdom that you channel to create those things, because I mean they're just incredible. Uh, but in terms of daily practice, you have the morning pages, which are where we after we wake up, we write with the pen and paper 3 pages worth of stream of consciousness kind of writing, and let things out. And I've been doing that every morning now for a few weeks, and I have to say I I love it. And I would like to think we will see that I will keep doing it after this interview because I find it very, very useful. I feel like it's, I mean, again, we're going to get into some strange territory to some extent, but I feel like it's unblocked things, and I feel like I'm much more aligned in that. Um, and I think doors are opening up for me, as crazy as that sounds. Like, I mean, I've been quite blessed. I don't want to not toot my own horn, but I usually am able to achieve a lot of things that I put my mind to. But I also can be a very harsh critic to myself. I definitely, uh, you definitely can suffer from that. But uh, I don't know. It's felt really good, just also for my well-being. I feel like I'm more in touch with myself. You mentioned this idea in the artist's way that Jungians tell us that the 45 minutes from after we wake up is when our ego hasn't fully kind of come back to form and form its defenses. So that's when we're vulnerable to get in touch with ourselves. And and I feel like I can get so much insight into who I am. So that resonates with me tremendously. I have to say. So I want to first, thank you for that. That is an amazing thing. And that's obviously a big part of the listening path, which we'll get to, because that's part of listening. You say that writing is listening, right?
Yes, definitely.
And you even say, I like that your play of words. I love wordplay. You also say that writing is also writing as an RIGHT. It's a way to write the
That's right.
world, to
That's right.
align the world.
It's the world.
Uh, and I feel that. You also quote someone later, I think it's in the listening path, saying that, what is it? That to listen is an acronym of silent. That's right.
Right.
That's right. Also, nice, nice. That's a great wordplay. Um, so let me just maybe just highlight a few things that really I felt were really powerful in the artist way, and we'll move from that to the listening path. Um, but I want to say that just a few quotes for people who don't know. One is, you say, our creativity is our gift from God. Our use of it is our gift to God. Accepting this bargain is the beginning of true self-acceptance. And
Yes.
that is so beautiful. And to highlight, you say, just to be clear for people, God can mean a lot of things. You don't necessarily have to be religious to buy into the artist's way. It could be the God within you. It could be a lot of things. You even mentioned in the listening path, a friend of yours, I think, a minister who talks about a God within rather than your God who's out there. Um, so so creativity is life, right? Living is creating. What can you expand on that, even though it's maybe yeah.
Well, I believe there's a creative energy that runs through all of life. And I believe when you're working with the morning pages, you're tapping into that creative energy and you're becoming a part of a larger whole. And I think you become more authentic. You find yourself saying, I didn't know I believed that.
Hmm.
And you find yourself uh, taking small risks because there's no wrong way to do morning pages. So your critic, mine is called Nigel, so your critic sits on your shoulder and and says, "Oh, Eaton, how could you say that?" And you say to your critic, "Thank you for sharing." And you just make your critic into a cartoon character who is always negative. And when you have made him into a cartoon character, it makes it much harder for the critic to muster perfectionism as an attack.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned also, I think it was in the listening path, that when you travel, sometimes there are times where you've skipped the morning pages and done it in an evening or something, but you don't get the same effect, right? It's not the same. You feel like right? Can you and why is that?
Well, if you write them in the morning when you're vulnerable and undefended, you're laying out a path for your day. You're laying out sort of a trail of choices that you will make that are positive.
Yep.
If you do them later in the day, you're reflecting on a day you've already had and you're powerless to change. So I think it's very important to do them in the morning. And what I have said is that sometimes when I travel, I get up and I just rush out the door. And then at night, when I'm in my hotel room in a foreign city, and I try to piece together morning pages, I realize that I have sort of wasted my day.
Yeah. So that seed is a very powerful one in the beginning of the day, as you say, as opposed to just, I guess, this passive reflection. But you also mentioned, I think it was in the artist's way, that it could be useful to uh, ask a question in a written form in the evening in order to let that kind of, I guess, I don't know, like gestate for the morning pages of the following day. Is that right?
That's right. I think I do evening pages sometimes. And in them, I ask for guidance about how I did during the day and what I might do the next day. And then when I wake up in the morning, I find that I have been guided and that there is a path ahead of me that looks clear.
And so, this is a very powerful tool to, as you say, to clear paths, to unblock people. You talk about how the morning pages can help us discover synchronicity, or things will kind of fall into place. Uh, Synchronicity itself is actually a Jungian concept, right? Uh, um, and so you mentioned that kind of basically things will kind of fall into place. The universe will align itself to you if you have the right I guess, yeah, that right preparation each day is the idea, as I understood it.
Well, as you write morning pages, you clear away your own debris and you find yourself able to hear your guidance more clearly. And when you hear your guidance more clearly, you're more sure-footed during the day,
Yeah.
and you hear guidance, and you step forward, taking what might feel like a small risk. And as you risk, you find yourself partnered by the universe. Uh, Things come into play, people, events, um, insights come to you. And I think that when you write morning pages, you are actually inviting this process to happen.
Absolutely. Well, I have certainly felt the process start happening for me, I want to say. Uh, and I love also, you have a quote actually, you quote Starhawk in The Artist's Way. There's a quote there that says, in the esoteric, in esoteric Judaism, within Kabbalah, the deep self is named the neshama, from the root shma, to hear or listen. The neshama is she who listens, the soul who inspires or guides us. Also, yeah, neshama, I actually do speak Hebrew, so I know that neshama is another word for soul. And that I found that really, really moving. Um, and and so listening, so because I mean, in a way, does most of the message in The Artist's Way really boil down to listening?
I
Would you
think
say?
so. I think that when we do morning pages, we're listening to our undefended self. We're listening to authentic parts of ourselves, to sort of whispers of guidance. And then when we take an artist's date, which is a once a week festive solo expedition to do something that enchants or interests us, we start to hear, if you want, the hum of the universe.
Mhm, mhm.
And I I have another poem that I would like to read, if that's all right
Please,
with you. Um,
absolutely, go for it.
it's called Jerusalem is Walking in This World. This is a great happiness. The air is silk. There is milk in the look that comes from strangers. I could not be happier if I were bread and you could eat me.
Hmm.
Joy is dangerous. It fills me with secrets. Yes, hisses in my veins. The pains I take to hide myself are sheer as glass. Surely this will pass. The wind like kisses, the music in the soup, the group of trees laughing as I say their names. It is all Hosanna. It is all prayer. Jerusalem is walking in this world. Jerusalem is walking in this world.
Beautiful.
So
I love it.
another poem born from joy.
Very, very joyous. Well, I'm just turning something off here. Here we go. Um, so that is beautiful. What is Hosanna? When you say it is all Hosanna, what does that mean?
Celebration.
Cool. So beautiful. And yes, the looks from people, how people can nourish us. That is, and I love that line. If the line with bread, what was that again? It was a beautiful image. I couldn't be happier. Something. What was it like? What was the line with bread?
I could not be happier if I were bread and you could eat me.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Um, wow, there's a lot of powerful imagery in that. Wow. All right, so yes, thank you. I love that as well. Actually, if you could send also by email separately, I want to have those poems also, so it'll be easier also in a text form because I definitely want to give them space. Beautiful poems.
We'll
Uh,
definitely email them to you.
so, and that, by the way, this is an interesting point. You you're such a creative person. You've done so many things from writing books on poetry to obviously there's the artist way to to filmmaking. Um, and you say that really all of us like have so much creativity in us. You mentioned, I think it was in the artist way that you also used to be too harsh on yourself in terms of attempting to compose music because you came from a family of musicians, and in your family, you weren't considered a musician basically. And there's even a story I think you mentioned about your brother where you had shared some piece that you had composed, and at first he liked it, but once you told him that you made it, he went back to his old way of thinking and thought, oh, maybe it's not that great, you know. Uh, so talk us how does one, because you are the master of unblocking people, uh, how does one, I guess, free themselves to be able to do that? You've certainly done that in your life, but we were always constrained, and we have people around us that affect how we see ourselves. How do we liberate ourselves to be all that we can be?
Well, this is where morning pages come in because they're private, they're personal, and above all, they're secret. And so in morning pages, we might hear, as I did, you will be writing radiant songs. And I read that and I thought, well, if I were musical, maybe. And then about a week later, uh, I said, uh, I can't write music. And the guidance insisted, you will be writing radiant songs. So the third time it came up, it was, you will be writing radiant songs. All right, I'll try it.
You
And
listened.
I listened uh, and I was obedient. And I felt that I was being asked to stretch beyond my creative height. But I
Mhm.
had learned to trust pages. And when they said, you will try it, I thought, all right, I'll try it just to hush it up. And what happened was I wrote my first song.
It's awesome. It really is. And you talked also, use the word stretching, to stretch oneself. And this is something that also comes up on several occasions, certainly in both books. There's a quote, actually, I wrote down from The Artist's Way, where you say, I was just thinking about, growth and resilience. And the quote is, selecting a challenge and meeting it creates a sense of self-empowerment that becomes the ground for further successful challenges. Running a marathon increases your chances of writing a full-length play. Uh, is that right? Do you believe that? I mean, to me, that rings true.
I
Do
believe
you believe
that
that?
absolutely. I believe that as we risk uh, at the suggestion of morning pages, we become stronger. And it's, as I said, the pages are secret.
Hmm.
So no one needs to know your fears, your trepidations, your reservations. And when you put them on the page, uh, they begin to seem a little bit silly. And there's a voice that comes to you when you write morning pages that's very sure footed and very steady and very reassuring. And it urges you to just try.
It's interesting. I mean, not only are they private, but at first, when I was reading through The Artist's Way, uh, I had there was a little bit of a trick there. It was a clever trick because they were even private for myself because you say you're not even going to read them. You put them away, and then later on, in a later chapter, we were allowed to go and take a look at our morning pages. Uh, Not that I felt the need to go and read in general. Like I think you can go and see things in there. And to be honest, my handwriting is so hard to decipher. It's hard for me to even go back and read my own writing. But regardless, for me, the process of actually doing that, it does help me find my compass, as you say.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true. That's a very good way to put it, and I think I'll steal it. Uh, that morning pages allow us to find our inner compass.
By all means, please go ahead. I probably am paraphrasing something you said. It's probably yours from anyway. But do you go back at all and read your morning pages when you have, because obviously you do them all the time, but do you do that?
Um, I read the guidance that I get when I do LJ. Can I have guidance about? And I'll go back and read that because it's very reassuring. Uh, I find that the voice of the higher self, which is what we're touching on when we do morning pages, is calm and sure footed. And it says, there is no error in your path. You're well and carefully led. And so reading that is very reassuring. You're well and carefully led. Aha. So I think that the responses we get from guided writing are actually answered prayers in retrospect.
I like that. I love that, and that makes perfect sense to me. Um, you mentioned, I think this was in the Artist's Way, because earlier you mentioned pain, and there you talk about how pain can get our attention to indicate that something's wrong, but obviously it doesn't need to be a way to drive your artistic self. We don't need pain, but it can be a way to get our attention. Uh, and then you also mentioned that jealousy can actually be a powerful tool, and you have this really cool exercise that I'll share in the Artist Way that at least I found it quite useful. And I don't think of myself as a very jealous person in general, but the exercise was to create three columns. One was for who you're jealous of, and then the other column is why, and then the third column was to take some sort of action to fix that, some sort of antidote or something to this jealousy. So, because maybe if you're jealous of someone, it means that you're saying there maybe you're missing something in your life, right? Um,
Yes, the shorthand way for putting it is jealousy is a map. And I think I was jealous of lady playwrights.
mhm.
And so then I thought, well, I better try and write a play. And I've now written 7 plays. And I'm no longer jealous of lady playwrights. I feel a sense of collegiality with them.
That is that is really really cool. Um, so yeah, because that's the notion that it's a zero sum game that you have to compete. It isn't necessarily like that. There's room for all of us to flourish, right? I mean, that's also one of the messages.
Yes, I think we have a mythology that says it's crowded at the top and there's only room for a few elite people who are fearless. And what I have found is that people who create through fear and around fear, and they don't get rid of fear, they befriend it. And I think uh, that they find themselves
They get in trouble,
emboldened.
basically.
emboldened.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you know, do you still feel? I mean, it is human to have fear. Do you feel fear still? I mean, does Nigel sometimes get under your skin?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I wrote the listening path, and I found myself having Nigel hissing in my ear, saying, "This is a book that's going to make people think you're too woo woo."
We will get to that. Not at all, by the way. I love it that you're actually go into some very deep stuff. We're gonna get to that in a second. And it's a beautiful book. I want to say again, I want to compliment you because it's a book also that people can read on its own. You don't have to read The Artist's Way. It does stand alone, and it gives you the basic tools of morning pages, the artist state, and walking, in the listening path. So one kid has everything one needs already in there, and it is a great book. Um, Jealousy. This is something that doesn't necessarily, yeah, jealousy as a map. I love that. I love that notion. Um, Something also you said, it's not exactly about jealousy, but you do mention that academics, I quote, know how to take something apart, but not how to assemble it. And so, I guess that shows that they can have a dangerous effect on budding creatives, basically, right?
Yes, I think that they can be very threatened. I think a lot of times academics are people uh, who have allowed their perfectionism to run rampant, and they find themselves critiquing everything not for its strengths, but for its weaknesses. And I think we know a lot about how to critique something, but we don't know how to say, oh, this is very good, do more of this. And I think budding creatives need positive reinforcement. And that is that they need to have what I call a believing mirror. Uh,
Hmm.
a believing mirror is somebody who mirrors back to you your strength and possibility. And I think budding creatives in academic settings are looking for that mirroring, but they may find instead a harsh critic and become discouraged.
And critics, both whether it's, I don't know, a professor critiquing or an actual critic who is critiquing, some sort of work out there in a newspaper, they often perhaps are jealous, right? Would you say that? Maybe I don't know if that's fair to say. Not all of them, but perhaps some of them might be if they're too harsh.
Well, Francois Truffaut was a critic before he became a director, and he says his criticism was harsh because he was a black director and not expanding his own creativity. So I think I wrote a mystery novel called The Dark Room, and it got 19 good reviews, and I was thrilled. And then it got a negative review in all places, the New York Times. And uh, the the critic was critical that my detective hero was a Jungian. He didn't believe in Jung, and so I found myself feeling ashamed, battered, uh, very upset with the criticism. And then I realized, well, I have a sense of humor and I can get my power back. So I wrote a little poem. This little poem goes off to Bill Kent, who must feel awful the way that he spent his time critiquing Carl Jung instead of on the work I'd done. And when people tell me that they are harshly criticized, I encourage them to write silly little poems. And when they do, they start to shake off the negativity of the criticism because they're exercising their creativity again.
I love that. I mean, you do mention how, I don't remember, I think it was in The Artist's Way, a story about how one critic basically got a director to go to Switzerland for like 7 years before he came back to Hollywood or something like that. Uh,
Yes,
uh,
that was
because
Blake
of a
Edwards.
heart. There you go. So they can have a very, very powerful effect. And to get out of, we need to know how to overcome these obstacles, which are inevitable in life. We're always going to come up against somebody who's going to say something nasty at some point. Unfortunately, that is part of it. But you talk about the mirrors, the positive mirrors. What did you call it again? Because you mentioned the listening the path again. What are they
Believing,
called? Believing
believe,
mirrors. Thank you. And this is a fundamental point, really, the idea that we need to find people that will help us see ourselves, but also reinforce and nurture our, our risk-taking, our creative aspirations, as opposed to these people out there like the critics or the academics or whatever, or just friends or family members that can't help it but to be very negative, basically. Um, and we need that support of these believing mirrors. We have to have that in place. So people we should call them and nurture those relationships. How do you find believing mirrors? I guess is a first question, because that obviously is a key thing. And how do you cultivate those relationships?
well, I think you listen carefully. And when you tell a story, you're listening for the your listener on the phone to have empathy, sympathy, understanding. And when you find someone who has empathy for your big self and your little self, that's a believing mirror.
And are believing mirrors usually reciprocal? Would you find that, or not necessarily? Are we a believing mirror to that person?
Well, I recently went through a situation where I had a man who is a writer who was, for me, a wonderful believing mirror about my work. And he got a harsh criticism and he took it to heart and he shut down his writing. And I urged him to try writing again. And he's been procrastinating about writing again. And I'm trying to be a believing mirror to him, but I'm essentially powerless because the risks have to be taken by the person themselves.
You
So,
can't help you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
right,
It's a very
exactly.
powerful thing. And you mentioned, I mean, you do in the listing path, you do talk about, I mean, it's different, but you talk about how, actually, I'll find it. You say um, that unsolicited advice uh, is a major conversation killer and can sometimes approach bullying. I'm paraphrasing here, and you point out how much you hate it when people tell you what to do, uh, even even if it's like quoting your own teachings back at you. So it's hard, right? It's hard to, obviously, we often want to give positive things. So I guess there can be unsolicited advice. It doesn't all have to be bad, right? It just depends on how it comes in there. But it is hard to, yeah, you can't, at the end of the day, people need to want to change, right?
Well, I think we can hope uh, that we set an example. And I do believe morning pages are contagious, uh, that we do morning pages and our friends notice a difference. And you say, well, actually, I'm doing an artist's way exercise, I'm doing morning pages. And they get very curious and they say, well, what do you write? Uh, and you say, that's personal.
Mhm.
And you don't share your morning pages, but it's like you have uh, worn a wonderful cologne. Uh, People are attracted by the scent of success.
It's true. It's true. Nobody talks about Fight Club is one of the rules of Fight Club. You don't share the morning pages. You just see there is people know that there are morning pages, but yeah, you do say what happens. Yeah, it's true. It's true, and I've already started evangelizing. So your morning pages, I've already had a few friends that well, I've given the book already as a gift, and a friend who's also just bought it. So I am evangelizing already. And it's a beautiful thing because again, there's nothing religious here. It's something that can just unblock and really help people. So I think it is a very positive thing. I mean, going back to this unsolicited advice for a sec, because it was a bit just to also put that in perspective. Obviously, you also have this notion that you mentioned the morning pages. We are able to we know best what's right for our lives, and the morning pages lets us be in touch with what we need and what we know. No external guru can tell us what we need to some, right? Is that right?
Well, this is where we come to the third layer of the listening path, which is listening to our higher self. And I think many times when we have a problem or an issue, we think, who can I ask about this? And we sort of canvass our friends uh, because we have a belief that they are wiser than we are. And if instead we take pen to page and say, what can I do about X? And then listen, we find we have an inner resource, an inner wisdom uh, that's very sure footed and very calm. And it urges us to take risks, but it also protects us as we are taking them.
Absolutely. Can you give me an example?
Well, um, so for me, when I was told I was going to write music, I thought, I'm 45 years old. If I were the least bit musical, I would know it. Uh, but the guidance kept saying, try. And I was teaching and I was staying up in the Rocky Mountains with a girlfriend. And I said to her, when I ask for guidance in my morning pages, I get told that I'm going to write radiant songs, and I think that's nonsense. And she said, well, why don't you go sit down by the creek? And there was a little rivulet of a creek running through her property. So I went down and I sat on a big rock and I was sort of half assed meditating. And all of a sudden I heard, my green heart is filled with apples. Your dark face is filled with stars. I am the one that you've forgotten. You are the one my heart desires. So dance when you think of me, sing to remember me, sing till your heart can see who we are. Dance when you think of me, sing to remember me, sing till your heart can see who we are. And I thought, oh my God, I think it's a song. I think it's a song. And I went running back up the mountain to my friend's house and I said, listen, is this a song? and I sang it to her, and she took a little Radio Shack. I don't know if you have Radio Shack over here, but a little electronic uh, tape recorder, just a cheap little tape recorder. And she said, "Here, sing it into this." And I sang it into that. And later on, playing it, I realized, oh my God, the guidance was right. I can write music.
It's a beautiful song. And not only that, you can also sing it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You really can. Beautiful. So this is a very interesting thing to this song came to you when you were out there. Um, uh, Basically, all of a sudden you were listening to your environment, and then something from within you. Yeah. Well, how where did that song come from? How do you what do you explain? How do you explain it?
Well, this is what I meant when I said that life is a creative force. I believe in a line from Dylan Thomas: the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. And I believe that when I was sitting by the creek and the creek was rippling past me, I was tuning in to the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. And that's my definition. You know, people sometimes will say to me, "Oh, Julia, you talk about a spiritual path. Does that mean God?" Uh, and I will say, "Well, you don't need to call it God. You can call it creativity. You can call it the higher force. You can call it the spirit of the universe. You can call it the muse. Many different terms uh, if it's uncomfortable for you to say God." And so
Spirituality. I'm sorry.
I have people saying to me, "Oh, it's a Sufi book." Or I recently talked to a Buddhist who was certain from reading The Artist's Way that it was a Buddhist book.
I love that. I love that they can see their own, their own reflection to some extent in it.
Yes.
Um, uh, it is very, yeah, very powerful and appealing to so many places. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Okay, that just brings me. It's a tangent, but walking you mentioned also is something that's a very useful way to reflect and tune into things. And you say that you also point out how it itself is utilized in numerous spiritual traditions, from Buddhist walking meditation uh, to Wiccans walking to Glastonbury, and obviously people know about the Camino de Santiago in Spain, or the Japanese have their Shikoku 88 temple pilgrimage as well. So walking itself can be a very spiritual thing. But um, going back to what you're saying about but listen to your higher self, the listening path itself is very interesting, because the first part of the book, just to give the structure of the book to share with people, it goes. Um, it starts from listening to the environment, and then it's listening to people, listening to our higher self. And then you don't actually say it this way, but I can call it listening to the afterlife. These are your friends in the afterlife. And then we say listening to heroes, our heroes. And then to silence, and we say finding God in the silence, or this creative force in the silence. And this is where, as you're getting towards that second half, it's getting very, very spiritual, because you're actually, you're sharing things that you wouldn't have shared earlier in the Artist's Way. These are things, as you say, that are kind of woo-woo. Certainly something that readers of Watkins magazine love, where you're saying, people, relationships don't die. People may die, but we can still communicate with our friends who have passed over. And then you go on to say, and not only that, we can actually reach out to people we've never met that may have lived way before us, and try and get guidance from them. And you give the example of uh, Bill Wilson, the founder, the co-founder of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, is someone who's inspired you, who's one of your heroes, uh, and that you like to reach out and communicate with. Is he someone you're still in touch with?
Yes, definitely so. I believe he had the courage to found a movement, and it started out with two people talking, and now it's millions of people talking. And he um, he had the courage to put on the page the steps that he had taken in order to have a spiritual awakening. And I think when I go to him for guidance, he's very warm and reassuring and helpful.
And in some ways, uh, one could argue that your the artist's way has contributed. There are some parallels to I guess to AA, in that it's also a system, right? It's not. It also has, I guess, well, 12 weeks rather than 12 steps, um, and it also has a certain routine to it, and has also been something that's spread. I mean, uh, and influenced a lot of lives. Do you see a parallel in that, or? Uh, um,
I think that's what makes me admire him so much, that he was graceful when things burgeoned further than he could possibly himself control. And I think for me, the artist's way started out with my sharing my ideas with just a few intimates, and then they unblocked, and then I had uh, a a man who was a blocked writer named Mark Bryan, and the book is dedicated to him because he said to me, "Where's the book?" And I said, "I am the book." And he said, "It should be a book. It could help a lot of people." So every week I would write, "What does he need to know to unblock?" And I sort of uh, aimed an arrow at his heart. And I think that the artist's way was born out of love, and it was also born out of temper. I had a temper. I felt artists weren't being treated right, and I thought, I'll just do something about that. And that's when I began to use all the tools that reinforced the artistic identity apart from the critical environment.
they're beautiful tools, and even as you say, they apply to people who might only have, only, because again, that's all very subjective, but have art, so to speak, as a hobby. So even lawyers, uh, can practice and do practice the artist way, and can have their creativity either come into their work, but also as a side project. And if people all over society recognize creativity for what it really is, that will help enrich so many people's lives. So you certainly have done that and been able uh, to grow in so many different, it seems like, paths. So it is tremendous. Um, and You also mentioned Carl Jung as someone that you like to ask for guidance from. Uh, can you share what inspires you about Jung? And obviously, he's also a very supportive character influence for you. But yeah,
Well, he was a supportive influence for Bill Wilson, and he encouraged Bill Wilson to believe in a spiritual path, and to believe that a spiritual path was the way to conquer alcoholism. And he was controversial in his lifetime. He was considered eccentric. Uh, Freud was considered hip, and Freud appealed to intellectuals. And Carl Jung said, well, there's something to be said for mystery. And so I admire him for having the courage to talk about mystery. And I find when I write to him that he's more formal. Bill Wilson is like, "Hi, Julia." Carl Jung is like, "Miss Cameron."
And to be clear, for those who are watching or listening or reading this, the way you ask for guidance, you write, you write your question on a page, and then you write back their answer. This is the mode that it happens, and it could happen because I'm not. It could happen any time of day, or does it need to be within the morning pages? When does one do that?
Well, I tend to do it at night, uh, but it can be done in the morning. Uh, it it follows on the 3 pages of writing that sort of clear the path. And I don't like to be too prescriptive and say you must do it at X time. I think I've been prescriptive enough with saying morning pages. And I think uh, it's important for people to find their own path. So one person may say, well, I write at noon for guidance, and that works for them, and that's fine. So I think when we're talking about a spiritual path, and the artist's way and the listening path are both spiritual paths, we need to have self compassion. We need tolerance and tenderness uh, for our own process uh, because we often come to the books having been battered uh, by the events of our life. And I think it's important to have a place where we're gentle.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, absolutely, and that's another reason to have, as you say, these. Geez, why am I starting with the uh, believing mirrors? That was the term. Uh, I need to remember that the believing mirrors because that is a way to be kind to ourselves. Believing mirrors will help us and foster who we are.
I have a believing mirror, a woman named Laura Letty. She's been my friend for 30 years, and she taught gifted kindergarten students. So when I talk to her, she has a great gentleness and a great uh, capacity to listen. And I, I find uh, if I call her up and say, I'm nervous, she may say, of course you are.
Hmm.
And that gives me permission to have my nerves and to be reassured.
I love it. Yeah, you mentioned her in the listing path,
Yeah.
uh, which beautifully. She sounds like such a wonderful believing mirror to have. Um, Also, to come back to the morning pages as the last thing, you mentioned that before, because I do also want to give you an oracle reading before we sign off, because I know we've already got over. I'm just having so much fun here. What I expected the duration would be, but um, it, you say that morning pages as a form of listening, they also help us. The morning pages ward off difficulties and warn us when trouble is looming. Almost, I'm paraphrasing here, almost like ESP.
Yes.
Um, can you explain more what that means?
Well, I think it comes back down to trust. We write our morning pages, we play, we do our art estates, and we walk. And what happens is we have intuitions and hunches. And I think we're used to discarding them and thinking, oh, that's too crazy. And instead, with morning pages, we say, well, maybe I should take that seriously. And we begin to tune in. Uh, I, I think humans have wonderful antennae. And I think that the tools of the listening path are putting us back in touch with our antennae. And I have, uh, you met Nick, uh, who works with me, and he's in the listening path. And he has a great capacity to hear. And I will start to say something, and if I break off and don't finish my thought, he'll say gently, really? And then I will expand the thought. And I think that when we are avoiding trouble, we need to have an inner Nick who says to us when we start discarding our guidance, our inner Nick has to say, really?
I love it. And thank you, Nick. Yeah, he's done a great job at setting this up. Is this the same? And forgive my, my ignorance here. Is he the same Nick that's because there's a Nick also mentioned in the book that helps
This
you,
is the
uh,
same
Kapatrunsky or something. I don't know what was something. What was the last
Kapuscinski.
name? Yes, that's right. And because you also
Kapuscinski.
mentioned his wife also visiting you at some point. He has a lovely wife and I think who accompanies him on one thing. And he
You're,
also, yeah, he fixes it.
you're thinking of
Sorry,
Anthony and Carmela.
that's right. Oh, that's
And
Anthony Carmelo. Sorry, that's different because Anthony fixed the roof. It was right. Sorry, my apologies. And Nick comes and fixes other things, helps with other things. So yes,
he's a wonderful poet and a wonderful actor. And recently we did one of my plays on Zoom.
wow,
Uh, and if you go to my website, uh, you can see the play and you can see Nick, and you can see why I take him so seriously as an artist.
that's
And
awesome.
uh, the I'd invite you to go to the website and go to music, and you can hear the music from two musicals. And then you have something called flower songs, which are lighthearted, tender, heart centered songs about gardening. And I, I like uh, I like putting things up for fun and for free on the website.
I love it, and I will share your website as well in our magazine article. You can be assured of that. So,
That would be
and
great.
I love that, and you really are an example of someone who just just is born to create. I mean, we all are to some extent, but you have certainly unblocked yourself and doing so much, and it's beautiful. And I've already enjoyed so many of your creations, and I feel I'm only at the tip of the iceberg at this point. So I'm gonna go to another room for a sec and I'm going to take the laptop and I'm going to give you a reading. This is a preview, just something I wanted to share with you that's inspired by Jung, actually, because Jung has quite a long uh, a relationship with Watkins. He, John Watkins, who founded the bookshop, which is in central London, he also was a publisher and he translated Jung's first book into English. And so and that was in the 20s. So that was quite quite a big deal. Um, so Jung, as we mentioned, he coined the term synchronicity, and so I've created here an oracle deck that is based on synchronicity. And so um, instead of taking one card, for every question you need two cards, and you find what is the synchronicity between those cards.
Uh-huh.
It's inspired by a game. But for example, these two cards, I just pulled at random. Every two cards will always have one matching symbol. In this case, it's the key that is the matching symbol. And that was just something that I drew, randomly. And this is the beauty of this oracle system. So, so what we're going to do, and it's nice because you can have two people, each one pulling a card and saying what is their synchronicity. Or what we'll do for you is I've come up with a system where we're going to ask three questions. Where are you coming from? Where are you now? And where are you headed? And then you'll have an intuition card as well. Yeah. It was fun, a fun thing to play with you and fun to share. Yeah, it comes out in September. It will come out. So
Oh, wonderful.
I'll make a note to send you a complimentary deck. So once
Thank
it's out. My pleasure.
Cool.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was great. Thanks. Take care. Bye.